Hey, hey. We are talking about those people. If you don't know what we mean by those people, you may have people in your life that drive you nuts, the type of people who get under your skin. Those are not those people. That's the beginning of those people, but those people specifically, what we are talking about is people in your life who are toxic people who bring toxicity into your life. And I've mentioned a couple times as part of this series, I think we could throw that around a lot. You hear that type of language a lot these days, and I think sometimes we've lowered the bar of what it means to have somebody who's a toxic person to just somebody you don't like. What we are talking about, though, are people who have cleared a much higher hurdle than that. I'm talking about the type of people who, no matter how much you work with them or try to set paths in front of you, it just seems like being around them sucks you dry. And so what we are talking about as part of this series is, number one, how to love people like that. Number two, how to set boundaries with people like that. And then number three, when those things don't work, how to and when to walk away from people like that, which should be, at least for me, I think, should be something that is used very, very sparingly. Today, what we're going to talk about is Becky. Let's talk about Becky. This is Becky. But this isn't just Becky. This is FinstaBecky. If you don't know who FinstaBecky is, that's because we made her up. If you don't know what a Finsta is, you probably should ask your kids if they have a Finsta, okay? What Finsta is it is the word that is used for fake Instagram, okay? So if your child has a Finsta, that's important for you to know as a parent. Because a Finsta is the fake Instagram account. So they have their real Instagram account, which you may know about. They call it their real Instagram account. But then they have the Finsta. On the Finsta is where they put what they really think, what's really happening in their lives. That is not the Instagram they want the world to know. When they are curating their life and showing what they want to show, that's their real Instagram. And then the Finsta is where they put the real stuff, which isn't it a world, right? Where you've got your real Instagram where you put your fake you, and then you have the Finstagram where you put your fake or your real you. Wait, real where you put the fake and fake where you put the real. Essentially, that's what we're talking about. So if your kids have a Finstagram, you should find out about that because there's probably the Instagram you get to see, and then there's the Finstagram that their friends get to see. I got you. So Finsta is that phrase which just talks about that fake Instagram where they put the real stuff. And so FinstaBecky, what we mean by FinstaBecky, what we're talking about is, and for me, I just think you don't put anything anywhere. That's just me, but that's me showing my age a little bit. I'm getting up there, and so now I'm just like, social media, who needs it? But that's just me. But FinstaBecky is the person whose life is perfect. Her life is perfect. She has the perfect vacation. She has the perfect husband. She has the perfect kids. She has the perfect job. She had the perfect weekend. Everything you see in her life is perfect because she shows it all in her perfect photos. Okay? That is FinstaBecky. Now, one of the things that I've started doing as part of this series is sharing with you good resources in how to combat and or win the battle against these toxic people. So for today, I have a tool that I want to share with you. It is a website for you to battle back against FinstaBecky. It is called lifefaker.com. I love it. They have different packages for you, and this is for your Instagram. So they have different packages that you can get from the Life Faker, and they've got, this is the vacation package. It's called the Look at My Holiday and Cry package, and you can just go ahead and buy photos from that and then post those to your Instagram so that your life looks perfect as well. Then they have the home package. This is the I just happen to live here package. And this is, I'm just tidying up for the weekend, and you show one of these photos. It's not even your house. That's okay. Nobody needs to know. Just don't invite them over. Lifefaker.com. Then they have the weekend package. This is the My Weekend Was Amazing Thanks package, where you can put any of these, all available for you. You've got the Just Good Friends and Incredible Stories. Parks are better with friends. You don't actually even have to go anywhere. Isn't this awesome? I got you. And then, of course, you have the lunch package. This is the Look What I Had for Lunch package. Japanese food is so cute. A few things from the market this morning, and you don't even have to cook. I got you. In fact, here's a video advertising it. So this is lifefaker.com.
These days, it's all about sharing what you eat. But you can only imagine how inadequate I felt as someone who can't cook.
I'd been single for a while, but my friends just wouldn't stop getting married and having babies. It seemed like everybody was #blessed.
I'm 22 years old, and I've never swam in an infinity pool. But when I look online, my friends are in them like all the time. I've never even seen one.
The Look What I Had for Lunch package from lifefaker.com turned things around for me.
Instead of getting an engagement ring, I just got the pictures. Now I have a perfect hubby and 3 little angels and pomegranate puree for breakfast every morning.
Being able to pretend that I rode an elephant in Thailand has really helped my confidence.
I've never seemed happier.
Knowing that people were seeing me hand roast my own granola, I got a lot of my self-worth back.
So there you go. Lifefaker.com. Brilliant. So the people who put that together was a psychiatrist group. And if you actually signed up for it, they connected you with a counselor, which I think is so funny because it's just genius. So that was 2021. That is not real, but I saw that, and I was like, so good. But during worship, I leaned over to Liz, and I was like, I only watched that video once, and normally we do a full Q run-through, but, bees. And so, I miss it, and I'm like, there wasn't anything bad in that video, was there? The entire time during worship, you guys were worshiping away. I'm like, there wasn't bad anything in that video, was it? I thought they would have caught it. They would have caught it. Whew. All right, so now I'm feeling much better about this whole sermon. And this may seem like, because I think to some degree we all kind of project a little bit. Come on. You don't put the dirty laundry on Facebook. You don't put the dirty laundry on Instagram, right? That stuff doesn't make it out. We all curate to a certain level. And you might think, okay, so Alan, I feel like this one's really not quite at the level of toxicity. But I will say the very first person I had to, in my life, create distance with was a FinstaBecky. And for me, that is something that I'm very, very careful with. I'm not the type of person who does that lightly. But I started noticing behind this person wreckage. And when you start noticing a trend of wreckage in relationships behind that person, then maybe you should be cued in on that. Because I'm not the smartest guy. But sometimes when you start seeing a trend of over and over and over again wreckage behind someone, you should be aware. And so I said to that person something to this effect. I said, man, I want good for you. I want blessings for you. But please lose my phone number. And that seems harsh. But it was important for me because I saw hurt in my friends. I saw hurt in another church. I saw hurt in my family. And I went, this is a problem. And I said, we have to draw some lines here. So let me start with the title for today's message, Unfollowing Finsta Becky. Unfollowing Finsta Becky. Now, some of you are not with me yet, so let's get into some scripture so you can come along with me through this process. 1 Samuel chapter 1 is where we are going to begin. So if you're like, okay, Alan, I still don't understand your point of view, well, hopefully we'll get there. By the end of this message, hopefully you'll understand what I'm talking about. 1 Samuel chapter 1 is the story of, or the beginning of, Samuel's leadership in Israel. Okay, so this is right before that. This is the story that typically would be read next week on Mother's Day. Everybody with a mother? A reminder that 7 days from today is Mother's Day. Consider this an act of service. You are welcome. 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 1, here's what it says. There was a certain man of Ramathaim Zophim of the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah, the son of Jehoram, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Zuph, an Ephrathite. Ramathaim Zophim is right next to Rivendell in the north of Middle Earth. And just kidding. Actually, Ramathaim Zophim means double height. Double height, which seems to just indicate that when it says he's in the hill country, Ephraim's right in the middle. Where we're going to be reading about is very close to where this would be. But he lives, so he doesn't live too far away from when it talks about the travel that we're about to read about. It's not going too far, but he's from a higher elevation is what it's saying. And then it gives us a bunch of names. And anytime you see a bunch of names in the Bible, first thing that might happen is your eyes might go, and you're like, that's probably not that important. Well, just the opposite. What this is trying to tell us is that this is a person who is anchored, right? This is a pedigree. This is not just some random person. This is someone who has a name and a father who has a name, and it goes back generations, right? So what we actually know from First Chronicles chapter 6 was that Elkanah was from the Kohathite family of priests, which means that his family, extended family, was responsible for the upkeep of the Ark of the Covenant. So this is somebody who has a pedigree, and so he can trace back his line to his father's 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 father, okay? So it's important to him, and that's the setup for it. He had two wives. The name of the one was Hannah, and the name of the other was Peninnah. And Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. So, okay, we know this is not going to go well, right? Like, you're reading it, you're like, ooh, come on, dude. But probably what's happening here is very similar to the Abraham and Sarah thing. What I mean by that is, as you're reading the story, and you start off with the son of Jehoram, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Zuph, it would really stink if that was the end of it. If there was no son of Elkanah, right? That's important to him. His lineage, it's a big deal. And so probably, not for sure, possibly at the very least, maybe even probably, he married Hannah first, and she was not able to give him children. And so he marries Peninnah, and hopefully she'll be able to give him an heir. And she does. But this is not God's design. This is not the way God designed it. And a big part of what we're about to go through here is a result of the fact that this is not the way that God designed it. It's clear in Genesis what the design was. One man, one woman, one life, right? For life. Okay, now, this is not that. So, a lot of what's going to come now is a direct result of Elkanah having two wives. I'm still trying to figure out how to have one well, and so I'm not trying to have two, but he was. And so that's the setup. Peninnah has children, Hannah has none. Verse 3. Now this man used to go up year by year from his city to worship and to sacrifice to the Lord of hosts at Shiloh, where the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were priests of the Lord. So Phineas and his brother were just trying to figure out, with 104 days of summer vacation, how they should, okay, never mind, okay. It was that kind of morning, okay? So that none of this is in my notes. I just, as I'm... You know, it's cool. So this is in Shiloh. Shiloh, I was this close to being able to go there in a couple of weeks and do an archaeological dig. Burl and Marianne Jenkins, their son, Dr. Mark Jenkins, over at Evangel and AGTS, is going to do an archaeological dig at Shiloh, and we're friends, and so he invited me, but I was just a little too late to be able to go. I was so disappointed because he specifically is digging right at the gates to Shiloh, which is where, if you read the story of Eli falls over and breaks his neck when he hears that the Ark of the Covenant had been had been captured, not kidnapped. But when it had been captured, he falls over, breaks his neck. That's right where Dr. Jenkins is doing that dig. And I was this close, and I just missed it, and I was someday. But Shiloh is where, when the people of Israel came into the land, they set the tabernacle, the tent, right? And by this point, it seems as if they had built around the tabernacle or replaced it with a building there. So this is pre-Jerusalem and the temple there. Before that, the place that the people would go to worship would have been Shiloh. And so at this point, like, there's a temple, and this is the place where people would go for worship and to sacrifice. And so he goes at least once a year, maybe as many as 3 times a year, in order to worship. And again, that place that it says he was from is probably very close. So it wasn't like a big journey to go up, but what it does show is that he probably had some resources. He was probably well off, and he observed religious holidays, right? So verse 4, on the day when Elkanah sacrificed, he would give portions to Peninnah, his wife, and to all her sons and daughters. So when it says sacrifice, and a lot of times when it would say sacrifice or talking about a feast, when they would come and bring the sacrifice, a lot of times they got to eat it. So there were certain sacrifices, like the burnt sacrifice, where they would come and they had to burn the entire thing except for the hide. The hide would be given to the priest as a way for them to support themselves, because they weren't allowed to own land. And so they would get the hide, and then they could sell the hide, right, the skin of the animal. But sometimes it would be just completely burned and no one would eat it. But that was not all the time. In fact, there were specific sacrifices where that was supposed to happen. But anytime you see a feast, it was a feast. The Feast of Passover, they would eat the lamb. The Feast of Tabernacles, it was a feast. And this is probably referring to the Feast of Tabernacles, which would have been a celebration right after the fall harvest. So in many ways, kind of like Thanksgiving for us. And so, but, I mean, more religious, of course. So if your Thanksgiving is just watching the Cowboys getting beat, that's a little different. But for them, it was a religious experience. So for me, watching the Cowboys getting beat, that's like spiritual, you know. And but this was probably Feast of Tabernacles, which means that they would go up and they would do this sacrifice, but then they got to benefit from the food, and so they would have a huge feast. And so for them, it says that he would give portions to Peninnah, his wife, and to all her sons and daughters. So when it says that she has children, she doesn't just have one or even one of each, right? It's all her sons and daughters. To have that modifier on the front side of it, all, that means that there's a bunch of them. So she's like popping out kids left and right. She's, in her world, has done what is expected of her. Culturally, she has nailed it, okay? And then there's Hannah. But to Hannah, he gave a double portion because he loved her, though the Lord had closed her womb. He gives her a double portion because he loves her. This is how I express to my wife as well. I get her 1 scoop of potato salad, and then I go back and I get her a 2nd scoop. And I say, honey, I love you. A double portion. That's how you show your love. Now, if it's chocolate. But this actually means something very specific, right? Like, in fact, culturally we don't get it, but for them, when this was written, it made a whole lot more sense, right? Even this would have been from the custom where the host of the feast would take one person and say, this is the person of honor at this feast, and would, as a result, give them the best portion of the food, sit them in a very specific honored spot, and then everybody would know it. In fact, we know that happens in 1 Samuel chapter 9, verse 22. I'm just going to read it. It's not going to be in your notes, and it's not on the screen, but this is what Samuel does with Saul. Then Samuel took Saul and his young man and brought them into the hall and gave them a place at the head of those who had been invited. This is a moment where he's honoring Saul. And gave them a place at the head of those who had been invited, who were about 30 persons. And Samuel said to the cook, bring the portion I gave you, of which I said to you, put it aside. So the cook took up the leg and what was on it and set them before Saul. And Samuel said, see, what was kept is set before you eat, because it is kept for you until this hour appointed that you might eat with the guests. This is a moment of honoring in front of everybody else who is there. It happens again in Genesis chapter 43, verse 34, where Joseph specifically honors Benjamin. When the brothers come to Egypt, here's what happens. Portions were taken to them from Joseph's table, but Benjamin's portion was 5 times as much as any of theirs. And they drank and they were merry with him. So this was Elkanah's way of saying and showing Hannah honor. Even though she wasn't able to give him the children that he wanted, even still, he loves her and he's honoring her, and he is doing that publicly for everybody to be aware of. Verse 6, then, let's go back to 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 6. And her rival used to provoke her grievously to irritate her, because the Lord had closed her womb. This verse is full of emotion, and it has the weight of time to it too. You know, like this isn't just like a one-time thing. This isn't something that happened one year. This is happening over and over and over an extended period of time. She provokes her, it says, grievously to irritate her, because the Lord had closed her womb. It doesn't just happen one time. Verse 7, so it went on year by year. As often as she went up to the house of the Lord, she used to provoke her. And therefore Hannah wept and would not eat. And Elkanah, her husband, said to her, Hannah, why do you weep? And why do you not eat? And why is your heart sad? Am I not more to you than 10 sons? What I am thankful for is men of God who understand the female condition. You know? This guy just gets it, right? Men, husbands, boyfriends, the next time your wife or your girlfriend is struggling with something, do all that you can to make it about yourself. So the story for Hannah doesn't stop there. So then she starts crying out to God, and Eli sees her, and Eli, the priest, thinks she's drunk. So like the men in this story are not nailing it, okay? So let's not like take it from that perspective. But the story does continue with Hannah crying out to God, and she lays her heart open before him. And you wonder, why would Eli think that she was drunk? There is something about the way that she is praying, and it says that she's praying without speaking. Now, for me, that's important. When I'm in prayer, if I don't speak it out, here's what happens. I pray for a little while, and then I start thinking about that conversation I had yesterday a little bit, and then I start praying again, and then I'm thinking about that meeting I have today that I'm going to have, and then I start praying again, and then I think about what I had for dinner last night, and then I pray again, and then I remember that TV show I was just watching, and that's for me. So it helps a lot for me to speak. Like, that helps my prayer life. When I'm praying, when I speak it out, I know that I'm focusing in, right? But this is not about a formula. This is about her interacting not with Eli. Eli's just an observer. This is about Hannah and the Lord interacting. And so she does just pour it out before him, and she doesn't speak anything out. She's just mouthing it, even though she's praying passionately, not according to any formula. And he mistakes it because it is not like maybe the culturally acceptable way to do it. Doesn't matter. That's not what it's about. It's about Hannah interacting with her God. And then God answers her prayer and gives her Samuel. And then she brings Samuel back and dedicates him to God. And then he becomes the final of the judges and the prophet who institutes and anoints the first kings. But before all of that, you have verse 6. And her rival used to provoke her grievously, to irritate her, because the Lord had closed her womb. This is toxicity. Okay? 2 times it says in 2 verses that Peninnah used to provoke Hannah to the point where Hannah couldn't eat. Even though she had 2 portions of potato salad, she couldn't eat. She would spend her time weeping. The word that's used for irritate here actually means to humiliate and to humble. So you have one woman who has all the sons and daughters, right? All the sons and daughters. She has them all, right? She has all of the blessing and success according to what culturally would be successful in that day. And then you have Hannah, who does not. And the one who has spends her time trying to humiliate and humble the one who does not. We don't know exactly how she did it. It doesn't tell us. But whatever it was serious. It says that it was grievous. She grievously irritated her. This isn't a small thing. It isn't harmless. But we can see that it affected, that it impacted Hannah. So let's talk first about, I think, Peninnah. Like, let's talk about her, the FinstaBecky, the one who says, look what I have that you don't. Let's think quickly about her motivations, because I think first it's always good to have compassion. Anytime you're dealing with somebody who is toxic, it is good to at least have compassion to understand why they're doing what they're doing, or at least somewhat where they're coming from. This is not coming from a place of health. Right? When you look at Peninnah and what she's coming through or going through, this is coming from her sitting at the table and watching Hannah, the other sister wife, be honored. Every time they get together and they have a feast, she gets put in the position of honor, and Peninnah and her children are not. This is coming from insecurity, and she's doing everything that is being asked of her, right? She's got all the babies, right? There's a son of Elkanah now. There's a bunch of them, right? So she is doing all that she can do. This whole situation is broken. For Peninnah, the fact that she's even in this situation, this is coming out of a deep insecurity and brokenness. And that is typically what happens and where somebody comes to the point where they become a FinstaBecky. That idea of, I'm going to show how great I am, does not come from a place of wholeness or health. It typically is coming from insecurity or just brokenness in general. These type of people are deeply insecure, and that is what drives them. Find compassion for those who always have to elevate themselves at others' expense. Find compassion, because that shows that there is a deep need for them to feel up a notch. They're feeling the fact that they are not up a notch, and that's why they have to work so hard at it. The whole situation is the result of sin. Sin has brokenness in this situation 10 times over. Peninnah needs to hurt Hannah out of her own hurt. If you know people like this, it isn't from a place of wholeness and health that they are pushing you down. You know what Peninnah means? It means jewels. It means ruby. Peninnah has value apart from anything, right? From her very name, she is precious, she has value, but yet she sees Hannah getting special treatment and it grates on her. I mean, she's making the babies like crazy and she's getting, I guess she's getting some love. But she's not getting the kind of love that she wants, right? So have compassion. Understand that these people like this who are working so hard to press you down in order to push them up, that is not health. This is brokenness, okay? So have compassion on people like that. But next, we need to talk about boundaries. Because that word rivals, go back to the verse, and her rival used to provoke her grievously. You know the word rival is only used 3 times in Scripture. One of the times it's talking about the cedars of Lebanon, and it says that the cedars of Lebanon have no rival except for the cedars that were in the Garden of Eden. Speaking of these trees that are gorgeous. And then there's another passage in Leviticus that talks about, hey, don't marry 2 sisters. Otherwise you will make them rival wives, is the word that's used. And that's kind of what's happening, at least a little bit here in this situation. But it's an interesting word, rival. You know you can have a rival without a rivalry? Do you know that? Part of the reason why I'm so hard on the Cowboys was because in the 90s, when I was growing up as a young, impressionable Packers fan, 3 years in a row, the Cowboys eliminated the Packers from the playoffs. And so I've hated them ever since. Ever since. 3 years. I can barely stand Troy Aikman. Ugh. Whenever he's like the one, just mute it. Troy Aikman. The Packers considered the Cowboys rivals. But in the 90s, the Cowboys did not consider the Packers rivals. They considered the 49ers rivals. Why would the Packers be your rival? They never once won. So the Packers considered the Cowboys rivals, but the Cowboys did not consider the Packers rivals. It's like the Bears. The Bears rival is the Packers. The Packers rival, not the Bears, right? Because they never win. I'm sorry, it just is what it is. It is possible to have a rival who does not consider you a rival. Do you have a rival? Like if I throw out that word rival, is there anybody who comes to mind? Like your rival? Because it is possible for you to consider them a rival and them to not even know you exist. Right? For it to be a rivalry, it has to be back and forth. In the 90s, it was the Cowboys and the 49ers. That was a rivalry because sometimes the Cowboys won, sometimes the 49ers won. It was a rivalry. For you to have a rival, that doesn't mean that they have to consider you a rival or the other way around. Someone can consider you're a rival and you don't even know they exist. Peninnah considered Hannah a rival, but Hannah had a choice on whether Peninnah was her rival too. This is a boundaries issue. See, the thing about a boundary is that a boundary is not intended to change the other person. See, sometimes I think we think that they're supposed to, but a boundary is not about changing the person on the other side of it. A boundary is just about drawing a line and saying this far and no farther. I have an admission to make, and this might be enough for you to leave praise. I'm sorry if it is. But a couple of weeks back, I told somebody this yesterday, and there was a little bit of a shunning happening when I told them. Okay, but a couple of weeks back, we were doing a rummage sale, and we live out in the country, and so nobody's going to drive out to where we live to buy stuff from us, but we had a lot of stuff we wanted to get rid of, and we wanted to make some money off of it. So we asked a good friend, hey, can we do a rummage sale at your house in your neighborhood, right? And they said, yes, absolutely. And it was a nice neighborhood, the kind of neighborhood that has an HOA that still works. You know what I'm saying? Some neighborhoods have an HOA, but come on, they don't really have an HOA. But this is a neighborhood that actually has an HOA, and they're serious about their HOA, okay? So we're sitting there. Oh, man. I'm sitting there. I shouldn't tell you this, but I'm going to anyways. And I apologize in advance for what it shows you about the depths of my soul, okay? So I'm sitting there, and we're waiting, and you know, we're waiting for people to come. People were coming, going in, whatever. I look across the street to the neighbor, and the guy comes out and starts mowing his lawn, right? And we were there Friday and Saturday. In 2 days, this guy comes out and mows his lawn 3 times. And I look in his lawn, and there's a sign that says, Lawn of the Month. I know, right? But here's what's wild. I was not impressed with his mowing technique. It was pretty poor, actually. So as I'm watching, one of the times he's mowing, his mower slips a little bit off of a curb, and the mower goes down and scalps his grass. I know! You all are flabbergasted too. Okay, so here's the really, really bad thing. Really bad, okay? I told you already that inside there's a little troll, okay? While we were there, the HOA president or assistant president comes to the rummage sale. And I said to him, that guy's got lawn of the month, huh? And he goes, yeah. And I go, see that one spot where it's scalped? What do you think happened there? This really happened. I'm so sorry. But the thing was, and I was talking to somebody yesterday about this, and I told them, and they said, you did not. And I said, I did. I'm sorry. And they're here this morning, so I won't tell you who they are. But they said, listen, that guy's going to win. Him and like 2 others have a chance at winning that thing on a monthly basis. And here's why. I looked at the lawns around that guy's lawn, and there were patches, there was never it was ever in doubt. Even if he scalps the grass a little bit, he's still gonna win. Why? Well, because he puts a lot of time into that lawn. He doesn't mow his neighbor's lawns. He doesn't deal with their grass. Why? Because there's a boundary there. A boundary does not say, hey, you change what's going on your side of it. What it says is, this is my lawn, and that's your lawn. Your lawn will look the way you want your lawn to look. But as for me and my lawn, you know what I'm saying? That's what boundaries are about. See, Hannah could not impact or affect what Peninnah does. That's Peninnah's problem. But Hannah can decide how much she is going to let Peninnah affect her. And that's what boundaries are all about. And at this point, I do need to share a book. From the moment I announced that I was going to do this series, Good Boundaries and Goodbyes, I had 5 people come up to me and say, hey, you need to promote this book by Lisa Turkhurst. Super good. Good Boundaries and Goodbyes. It just talks about what boundaries should look like and why they're important and how they should impact your relationship. Hannah does not control Peninnah. Peninnah controls Peninnah. Hannah controls Hannah. But Hannah allowed Peninnah to become her rival. Now, Peninnah was provoking her. She was very deliberately, grievously provoking her. But Hannah decides if she is going to be provoked. You decide how much someone else's provocation affects you. It is very easy to unfollow someone's Instagram. And if you keep looking, knowing it impacts you, that's on you. And this is the case with social media in general. Like people who don't even intend ill, I have had to unfollow because of my own soul, right? Like maybe they don't intend ill in any way, but I go, man, I got a problem here, and it would be just better for me to not to see what they're doing. But you have to decide to do that for you. Now, let's assume this isn't social media, because it doesn't just stay in the social media world. There are people you know at work that moment you share something good, they have to share something better. There are people at work where the moment you have something you want to talk to them about, they one-up it, right? Because they got to show how their life is somehow better than yours. They have to press you down in order for them to be better. So let's go back to Peninnah. And it says, her rival used to provoke her grievously to irritate her because the Lord had closed her womb. Peninnah is grievously provoking her to humiliate her. So let's talk about why this is so serious. This is so serious because she is seeking to get a reaction out of Hannah. What is the reaction she is seeking to get? What is it that Peninnah is seeking to provoke Hannah to do? What is all of Peninnah's effort going into? She is seeking to provoke envy. And if you want to know the world we live in right now, if there was a word that I would give to our culture, I would call it the culture of envy. We live in the culture of envy. You want to know a lot of even the gender stuff that's going on? What is that but envy? You have something I don't have, and I want it for myself. It is just envy. And this is a real sin that causes all sorts of problems in our lives. So if you are the type of person to seek to provoke someone else to envy, that is a real problem. For this is why I would say this can become toxic. And I'll tell you right now, men, this is at least in my life, this is how this works. Because I am very much Elkanah or Eli here, right? I'm just oblivious. And a lot of times it takes me a long time to catch on to what's actually going on. But if I notice the women in my life, the people I trust, who all pick up on something, then I go, hey, maybe there's something here. And do that, men. Be aware, because women pick up on this much quicker than you will. I've found this to be the case, that when somebody has this issue where they're constantly trying to provoke envy, first thing you'll notice is they won't ever actually follow through on a lot of the stuff they pretend, right? If you put all your effort into fronting, you got nothing left for the back end to actually make it happen, right? It's all show and it's no go. Like you don't have any opportunity to actually make the things happen. So when somebody is constantly fronting and trying to show how great they are at your expense, there's no energy left to actually make the thing happen. Galatians chapter 5, verse 26 says, let us not become conceited, provoking one another, envying one another. That's a sin. Envy is a sin. And so for me to seek to provoke envy in you, that means I am seeking to provoke you to sin. That's serious stuff. And if I need you to sin in order for me to feel okay about myself, that is toxicity. Okay? That's toxic. Somebody just going out and showing, that's a different thing than somebody needing you to be worse in order for them to be better. For someone to have satisfaction, for you to have to envy in order for them to have satisfaction, is to make you sin and so get satisfaction at your expense. This is a real problem. Anytime it costs you something for someone else to be satisfied, that is toxicity. It isn't healthy, and it's really, really bad, right? Matthew talks about this. When you cause somebody else to sin, especially a child, it is better for you to have a millstone tied around your neck and to be thrown into the sea. This is serious stuff to provoke somebody else to sin for your benefit. And when this happens in believers, it is doubly so. Oh, my husband is so spiritual. He's so great. Your husband's not like that, is he? We had such a great vacation. Here we are, reading our Bibles. If you are provoking someone else to envy for your own benefit, that is a real problem, and it is unhealthy. Most of all, it's unhealthy for this reason. It is unhealthy because of the fact that Christianity is not we are Panina, right? Christianity is not, look at how well I've got everything together. Look how spiritual my kids are. Let me show you how perfect we are. That's not Christianity. Christianity is that we are Hannah, right? That we don't deserve it. That we haven't lived up to the bargain. And yet still we are shown unmerited favor. We are Hannah, not Penina. That's the whole point of our faith. The point of Christianity is that God has brought us to the head of the table and given us a portion that we do not deserve. And he has blessed us with this and poured it out on us, not because of us earning it or deserving it, but because of his goodness. It's his goodness that has caused that he brings us to the head of the table and pours out favor on us. And so someone working so hard to prove that they are perfect just totally misses the whole point. And so if we do this with our faith, man, there is some real danger there. Number one, in provoking others to respond in envy. But second, that we're missing the whole point of what Jesus Christ came to do. He came to pour out blessings on us. I mean, even if you think about that in relation to Psalm 23, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. This is the story of Hannah. That right there is the story of Hannah. And then even what happens with Samuel, the story is incredible, where she brings him back to the temple, and then he lives in the temple. And every year she makes him a little kid's ephod, right? Like the priest costume thing. She makes it for him every year, and he as a little kid is wearing an ephod. How cool is that, right? Like this is the story. Not that we're perfect, but instead that God pours out blessings on us that we do not deserve. This is our faith. And so when you have somebody in your life who progresses past, and I'm going to say just them trying to seem perfect, I won't call that toxic. When it moves to toxicity is when they are seeking to push you down and through that to push themselves up. Be very careful and set boundaries and decide, how far am I going to let this person impact me? But then if the boundaries don't work, there may come a point where you need to say, hey, if you don't mind, lose my number. Because this is serious stuff. And if it is provoking something intentionally inside of you, you've got to deal with you. And that is so very important to get right.